Welcome back to another episode of the Momentum Shift podcast. In this episode, I'm your host Ayush. My co-host Nishant is also here, and our guest Samarth is also going to be here. We're going to discuss the pandemic response for any country that's struggling with the response, and just how to control it. All right, guys, what would be the first step you guys would take to a struggling to a struggling country right now? If you're a leader.
I mean, honestly, the first thing would be the border control because a lot of countries had a problem with the borders initially, and that's what caused such a huge, what's it called? A huge peak in the cases initially. But now, if you look at it, if they've all closed their borders or limited it to a certain extent, it's all very low now.
But
Yeah,
border control isn't a big problem now. That was a problem when there were cases in isolated pockets of the world. Now the pandemic has spread to every single country, and I don't really think
Hmm.
border control will help too much. It'll only help if if you're next to a country that's really struggling and you're not struggling. Like for example, if New Zealand was next to America, then they would want to close the border. Otherwise, it doesn't make too much of a difference at this stage.
yeah. I
At
mean,
this stage, yeah, it didn't. I mean, it would have made a big difference, and if initially that happened, then probably a lot of the stuff that would have happened wouldn't have happened because, like, even like for example, India shut down its borders a little late, and if they had shut down maybe a few weeks, maybe a few weeks earlier, we wouldn't have had such a high peak initially, and now that it's gone down, which is good. So yeah.
Yeah. So, but that was sort of initially almost like 10 months ago, 9 months ago. What about now? What would be the first step now, Nishant?
if you're talking about a country like America, you have to make sure you issue a mask mandate. So make sure every single person that steps out is wearing a mask because that's such a big issue in America, and a lot of people aren't wearing masks, and that's what's causing a lot of the cases. But in another country where they're already wearing masks, there's a different step you might have to take. So yeah, what do y'all think the different step would be?
I honestly also agree with you that like the main thing is that everyone has to be careful at this point because it's not a big scare anymore. It's just more of like a new thing that everyone is just wondering how to handle it. So like if everyone just follows a certain guideline that's been issued from most countries, like quarantine for a couple of days if you've gone out or met someone who has it, or like be careful when you step outside your house. Like certain simple rules should be followed.
So, I think there are two sides to this debate. One is wearing a mask seems like a very simple solution, but a lot of these countries are in the place that they are in because of because people don't wear masks. And I don't think it's really it's a realistic solution for a place with that's so divided like America maybe, or even some place like India where they don't necessarily have the power to enforce this in every corner of the country. Maybe in the big cities in the most congested areas you can, but otherwise I don't see this being a realistic solution. Right now, of course, it would be the ideal solution, but it just doesn't seem too realistic to me.
Yeah, because like there's a certain point at which the government can help us, and then it's us who have to help ourselves. So like, yeah, it isn't a realistic solution because people don't want to do it. But I mean,
Yeah, and
if
now
you
it's
say a
dragged on
realistic,
so long. It's dragged on so long that people aren't afraid of it. They see that the mortality rate is about like 2% or 1% or something like that. So most people who get cases don't actually die from it. So for a lot of people, and some people don't even show symptoms, some show very mild symptoms. So I think at this point, it's just dragged on for so long that getting people like a nationwide mass campaign won't work now because most will just feel like, hey, what difference does it make? The disease can't touch me, right?
yeah. I mean, also now that we're seeing so many vaccines come up, people are just getting a bit more. They're just getting unafraid of it. They're like thinking like it'll just become the common cold. But what they don't realize is that it's still going to be there. It'll still be dangerous. It's just the fact is that the coronavirus isn't the deadliest one we've seen, but it's just so new, it's so unexpected that we didn't have any initial preparations. And now that we're like 10 months in, every almost the bigger countries and have developed vaccines, are in the processes of it. So it'll be really difficult for like something complete, like a policy or a guideline that everyone will follow, that will help the pandemic in the country.
Yeah, in America, for example, the vaccine's already so developed and so spread out that even my parents are getting the vaccine now, even though they're not even doctors. And America like has a different response than some of these other countries, and a lot of people aren't taking it seriously, as well as your point, because people just like think it's the think that there's a vaccine now, so they're not going to get hurt, but they could still die, and they're just not looking at it the same way, and it's causing a lot of issues. But I feel like a lot of countries like handled it right in the beginning, because there was not much they could done, especially in a place like India where there's so many people. It's so populated, dense, and to be honest, they kept it pretty well, but like under how much they could have had the cases. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was.
so I think one point you made about your parents getting it, I don't think that's a valid point at all, because you have to consider it's in America, which is the example you're using, 330 million people. So, and I agree that they're not the only ones, but your parents do have a job which provides them healthcare. They're willing to take the vaccine, and they're above all else, they are on a country level in the top 1% or top 5%, whatever you want to say, of income. So they also have in incredible financial mobility, which enables them to get the vaccine, whereas someone who's struggling to get by may not be able to afford it right now, or not even afford it, but they might not even have a job which provides healthcare. So I think that wasn't really a good a good example.
Yeah, I think
I mean, also, if
I was
sorry,
saying I
go
think
ahead.
some of the governments that in countries that aren't able to afford the vaccine should be providing free vaccines if they're able to, because they need to make sure that all their citizens are getting vaccines, and they should also make a law saying that every single person has to get vaccinated. That's what they're doing in
No, no,
Indonesia.
that's not realistic at all. Especially in a democracy like India or America or something, particularly in America, you simply cannot. It's not a police state, so you can't tie someone down and inject it. And there are too many freedoms. You can't force anyone to take it. That's completely unrealistic.
I mean, I was also going to say that like it's very realistic to say that you can get the vaccine if you're living in a place like even in India, it's going to be very realistic because while we're really populated, we also have a really good medical system, and that will actually help almost everyone get the vaccine, if not everyone. But it's like if you look at countries that are really poor, it's going to take a long time for the vaccines to even reach there, and like that's going to completely change how the world works. So a realistic solution is going to take a while, I feel, a long time.
So the like one thing, what would you guys do other than the vaccine? Like the vaccine distribution is one thing, probably the most important thing. But other than that, what other measures would you try and do? And again, they have to be realistic, because at this point, like nationwide mask mandates don't work, because it's just been so long and not everyone's gonna agree to it.
I think I don't know how many countries are doing this, but even if countries are doing this, the government should try to pay people like as much money as they can, like as long as they're not going over their budget or whatever, because the more people get paid, I feel like they're gonna stay home because they don't feel the need to go out and do what they need to do. And if the government's paying people to stay home, I think more people will stay home, I guess. So that could be a solution.
But
I mean,
is
like
that
then
if you're staying home, what happens like if you have to go to get groceries or something? Like, are you just gonna rely on online delivery or something? There's a need to leave the house at all times.
Yeah, but
So
what some countries are doing is giving each like house or each area a specific day to go get groceries. So, for example, your family's gonna go on Sunday, and then my family, like at 4 p.m., my family's gonna go on Sunday at 5 p.m. And
that's
they
actually
kind
really
of
smart. Yeah.
made a system where each family has a specific time to go get groceries, and they give you two times actually, just in case you're not able to go to one of them, and
Yeah, that's
they're
actually
kind
really
of
smart.
keeping you,
I
which
mean,
could
that could
work.
also work in like a place like Delhi because like Delhi is divided into different constituents, and then in each constituent you can divide it according to like a certain area goes, and then another area goes, and then another area goes at different times. So then like no one, it's never crowded at all times. It's always spaced out and staggered. So that is also a good solution. But like lockdowns, maybe not like a long lockdown, but like a 7 day or 8 day lockdown, also just, for the cases to go down and then slowly reopen up again may also be a solution because like how the UK is currently in lockdown, like some tier 4 now. And like the thing is that they're going into lockdown and then opening up everything and then again going into lockdown. Like it needs to be like a gradual opening up and then only it can be like back to normal.
Also, for the timing thing, how are you able to organize that, especially in a place like Delhi where there's so many people? And how do you enforce the law? And how are you making sure that people aren't going out at the
Exactly.
time
India has
they're going
such a
out?
huge
Because
problem with policing, and I mean, no, I'm not even getting into corruption and all that, but just like sort of laziness and not wanting to do the whole thing. Like, and even if you have a police force of fully committed, fully energized officers, there just simply aren't enough in a place like India to keep up with the incredibly high population.
Yeah,
Plus, I don't see how you institute, because a place like Delhi is so vastly different in terms of the
literacy as
population,
well.
like yeah, the affluence, because they're incredibly rich people, they're pretty rich people, they're like somewhat middle class people, then they're poor people, then they're really poor people. And unlike a major American city or a European city where the majority are middle class, it's quite divided in Delhi. I mean, of course there aren't too many rich people, but it's really there's a higher proportion of middle income and lower income families.
And also, the literacy rate is a big thing because even if they aren't literate, I've like initially a lot of actors and rich people also refused to wear masks, and even if they tested positive, they would just not isolate or quarantine themselves. So it's also a big matter of how people see their choices and freedom as like there have been so many times that people initially in India also when they were tested positive for COVID, they were put into isolation, but a lot of them just ran away. They like escaped and ran away, which had worsened it. And because like if they hadn't gone there, we would have had lower cases because in the contagion, this spreading would have decreased. But like it's a main thing also about like how you also said about lower income and middle income people. These people cannot afford things like a laptop or a phone also. So like they won't be even be able to do a job online. So it's going to be very, very difficult for them.
yeah, although that's a good point. Los Angeles is the worst city in the whole world for COVID, and it's actually pretty high like income, and I don't understand why that city with all like it just doesn't make sense how it's the worst city in the whole world with all the precautions being in California. Like it just doesn't make sense to me. What do y'all think about how that happened? I guess.
Honestly,
So
I don't haven't been reading the news much, but I think it's I don't know, but like a majority of Americans also feel that it's pretty hard for them, I would say, to completely cut off from a social life, which is why you would see that like compared to India initially, like where it was completely empty, there was still little activity and still life in like places like Los Angeles and New York. So it's also about that want that people have of wanting to socialize, wanting to meet people, wanting to go
that's
out,
sort of happening. That's
which
sort of
could.
happening everywhere. I don't know how much news you read initially, but the first place that was hit hard by the pandemic in America was New York, and
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
governor of
yeah.
New York, Andrew Cuomo, and the mayors and all, Bill De Blasio and everyone, they it is the most recognized city in the world. So all the news articles and things, and I mean again, it's mainly because American media controls the world. You could see articles like "The city that never sleeps is finally asleep," and stuff like that. Because even in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
daytime, there weren't anyone on the streets and all that. And this is a
yeah,
city that
yeah.
was normally always super busy, always had an incredibly high number of people and everything. So I think now it's just
Hmm.
for some place like Los Angeles, there'll be a high concentration, high proportion of younger people who, like you said, the point about socializing is better. Going out to like a bar or something like that, which an older place won't do as much.
Hmm.
And Los
Hmm.
Angeles, I think it also has a large population, which is a big deal. And it's really divided in terms of there are like really low income areas and high income areas. Like there are areas with the actors and the athletes and everyone else lives, and then there are the poorer neighborhoods. So that divide really would have hurt the area.
Yeah.
Um,
Also, you can also talk about the concentration of people because, like, maybe Los Angeles, a lot of people don't go out, but like, even if like a few 40, 50 people gather up and they go to a bar or go to a party or something, there'll still be a widespread because one person can infect another 10, 15 people at least. So, like, there may not be a lot of partying and socializing, but the fact that there were 50 people who went out and partied
Yeah,
and some of
party
them
is
got
very
COVID
valid
and
because Los Angeles is known as the city with the greatest
for the
nightlife in the whole
parties.
world.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
what do you guys think about people who are um, anti-mask and even more, and to a lesser degree, anti-vaccine also?
um, to me, it just seems like they don't really understand the issue, the um, virus, and they think that they're not going to die. But what they don't understand is that they could infect other people, which is why they're making a big mistake. Also, people that are not wearing masks, they're gonna like keep on spreading the virus, and right now the virus already mutated once, and we found it in England, right, where the virus
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
second strain. It's gonna continue to mutate and mutate and mutate it forever, and the vaccine won't do that much because there'll have to be a vaccine every single year, like the flu or
And what
anything
about
like that. And
resistance to the vaccine?
yeah, exactly. If they're not taking the vaccine, there's gonna be the vaccine's gonna be able to like mutate, and I feel like it's gonna like the vaccine, the virus is gonna mutate, and the vaccine just won't be like as good as it could be because people will continue to get the
That's a
next
very
COVID.
valid point because the like one thing you learn in biology when you're taught about vaccines, it's the first thing you have. First thing you can't do it for like petty uses. You have to take the antibiotics when you need it, and you also have to finish the dose because any any microbes exposed to the antibiotic that aren't killed by the thing have survived the antibiotic. They've been exposed to it, and now they have antibodies, and therefore they have resistance. So the same thing will happen on a larger scale, where like 60% of the population gets the vaccine, but it's still rampant around the other 40 that choose not to, and eventually it'll mutate and so it'll get in contact with someone that has already been vaccinated, and then it'll just mutate and the whole thing will
Hmm.
start again.
Yeah, that's the problem. Also, like when it comes to people who refuse to wear masks or are anti-vaccine, honestly, like you can tell them facts and statements that have been backed up, that are true and that have been proved. It's at the end of the day, it's their choice, and they refuse to wear a mask. So a good solution can also be to just avoid those kind of people, because at the end of the day, the government can say like the vaccine's been proved to be good, this, but there will always be that certain section of people who just are against it.
No,
And
vaccine I get.
it
Vaccine, you there's a there have to separate this argument into two because vaccines, there was some idiot named Andrew Wakefield. He's in my biology textbook. He was some British idiot. He decided I'm going to I have this thing that the MMR vaccine, measles, mumps, and rubella or German measles,
yeah,
that
yeah.
vaccine leads to autism in children. So ever since that time, there have ever since he published that study, that is the go-to thing people say, and this was obviously disproved in less than a year. It was objectively and unequivocally rejected, and yet that's still a thing that is cited: autism and diseases and things like that. And vaccines, they do have a tendency that they could kill you, they could harm you. if they mutate or something
Yeah, but
goes wrong. But it's like a 1 in 59,000 chance for the MMR vaccine, where compared to like a one in 8,000 chance for the 1 in 8,000 chance for getting the actual disease. So you take your pick, 1 in 8,000 or 1 in 59,000.
You know, you know, the people that are anti-vaccine are actually, some of them are actually pro-mask. It's kind of cool how the opposite sides are both against something that can help you, because like, I have a lot of friends that are worried about taking the vaccine, but they're really pro-mask and they're all pro like lockdown and all that stuff. So it's pretty interesting. And I saw a study saying that more than 50% of people that don't want to wear masks also want to take the vaccine, which is kind of
No, that's
interesting.
not true. Wherever you got that from is fake. To quote an
I mean,
orange,
like one thing is
fake news.
I'm very scared of needles. So like a lot of people may just be scared of it. Can be fake, but a lot of people can just be scared
I
of
mean,
needles, which is why
yeah,
they're
Samarth, I agree that's a
anti-vaccine.
valid concern for you, but being afraid of needles isn't the biggest thing for most people. And again, these vaccines aren't
Yeah.
being given to 4-year-olds; they're being given to. Of course, it's a legitimate concern for you, but it's not going to be widespread. It's going to be widespread among the younger population, and they're not going to get the
Yeah.
vaccine, especially initially.
You know, a country though that has more control over their people is way easier to like stop the virus. Like Thailand, for example. In Thailand, they just went into lockdown and they had zero cases as soon as the virus came out, and they just never had cases. And it's it kind of shows that sometimes maybe the government needs more control, but for other types of
I mean, yeah,
issues,
like you can look at places like Singapore where, although not everyone, but the majority of population follows the government, listens to the government. You can see how well they did initially and how well they're still doing. And and then you can just compare it to a place like America. Like Singapore and America are two good, they're big countries. They have a lot of things to offer, but like you can also look at the way that people choose to follow. They choose to trust the government in Singapore. While it's not wrong to question the government, but like America has a widespread, there has the people who are for and people who are against, and then there's always a constant
That's
conflict.
because of the two-party system, where one party they're the extreme opposite, sort of, in some ways. Whereas in Singapore, it's mainly like it's not exactly a democratic government, and it doesn't have the best freedoms of speech and all these other things. So I
yeah,
think
you
that's
should,
one reason. There's no like opposition. So there's the American society is dividing into the Republican and or not Republican conservatives and liberals. So that divide is sort of
Mm,
like if I'm a conservative and I live in a liberal state, if the governor issues a mask mandate, I just won't listen to him, and vice versa, or things like
mm,
that. I think with masks, vaccines, I somewhat understand if you don't want to take it. You're putting something into your body. This vaccine obviously would have been rushed to minimize the deaths
yeah,
and cases and all that. But the mass, I don't see. So in economics, one thing you learn is opportunity cost. It's the next best option you lose. What option do you? What's your what? How do you lose anything by wearing a mask? I mean, yes, you look a bit worse in
exactly.
pictures. You might be. It might be a little bit harder to breathe, not a lot, but people have done crazy things like they run a marathon just to prove that it's not, and things like that. So it's really just a thing of no one can tell me what to do. That's the whole idea behind anti-mask people. Probably there's no legitimate reason not to take it. People say like, well, if your body needed it, they would grow it. Like, do you wear clothes? Do you wear shoes? It's the same principle as that you're just going against. But it's simply just the thing that no one tells me what to do. That's the only and only reason people
Yeah,
don't wear
yeah,
masks.
that thought of freedom, like I can do what I want. You can't make me do what I want.
Exactly.
Like also,
No one tells me what to do.
I'm asthmatic, and for a long time I used to have struggle breathing. Like I wear a mask. It's not that hard to wear a mask. It doesn't affect me a lot. Like yeah, it can get a bit difficult to breathe. But I mean, it's the price I pay for not getting the disease. Like it's been 10 months, like almost 11 now. Touch wood, I don't have the virus. I like some people I know who have gotten it, but my family, almost my whole family has not even gotten it. So like, it's the precautions you need to follow. Like at the end of the day, like you said, also the government can give you guidelines, can give you suggestions, can give you help to do what you want. But But if people refuse to listen to the guidelines, if people feel that the guidelines are wrong or it's just false, it's just going to hurt them, not and people around them.
That's a very interesting point. So, what do you guys think about the role of media, social media, and just disinformation or how people get their information in general?
Um, in America, for example, the media is also split like parties almost now, and people only listen to one side of the media. And I feel like if the media had united and kind of said we all need to do this, then it would have been a lot more better. But one side of the media, for example, CNN says one thing, Fox News says another thing, and
Yeah, and
it
that's
just
and the opposite side, it's really tough to see because whoever is a Republican, they only and only listen to Fox. They just disregard CNN and all in its entirety, and vice versa. So I think that really hurts it where you only get one side of the story. So however they want to portray it, your entire beliefs revolve around what that news network portrays to you. So I'm sure for the Capitol siege, there would have been two very different portrayals of what happened by CNN and Fox. So, and you would have, if you're on one side because of the divergence, you would only have listened to one side.
yeah, like in England, their main news is BBC, and BBC isn't it isn't party affiliated, so it's actually a lot more trusted. And in my opinion, it's like the way to go because they have like double-sided news and there's no bias. So, and
Exactly.
their media is also really powerful there. So it kind of shows like the difference, I guess.
Exactly. Something like
I
Al
mean, yeah,
Jazeera, you don't know whether to trust Al Jazeera or not, particularly if you live in Qatar or
Yeah.
wherever they're from. I think they're from Qatar, yeah, because it's a state-run thing. So, they can censor stuff and they can put whatever they want to do that. But BBC is a very good example because it's not state affiliated and it's also not party affiliated.
I mean, also, like, yeah, the media has to be unbiased because if you look at it now, also, like, even in India, a lot of the time the media is biased, and people don't see the need to look at both sides of the story. They feel like the side of the story that they like is what they keep, and
Yeah,
they don't
you
even
hear
look
what
into
you
what
want to
the
hear, sort of.
yeah they want to hear what they want to hear. So like, and there's always going to be that one news media, that one anchor, that person will just talk about the one good side of the government, which some people will prefer listening to, and they won't listen to the stuff that the government did wrong or the government messed up in.
Yeah, and
And
then there'll
like,
also
then
be
they're
the
going to be
other
those
guy
people who are going
who
to be
stresses only on the bad things, right?
exactly. And there's no balance now in a lot of countries. Like, yeah, like how you said, BBC has its balance. Like, it talks about the good, but it also talks about the bad. And that's when and if you combine both of them, then you have an unbiased opinion. The essential need for a media is to give an unbiased opinion. It's just stating facts, and the facts are being given to the reader or the listener. And if you're just going to tweak the facts or censor some of the facts to give something that is that is suitable for that the media, in the which case, like, if the government funds it or something or the other happens and they benefit from it, then that's not a good way of practicing media, honestly, because like you're doing it because it's biased and it's going to benefit you rather than it's going to benefit the listeners in getting an unbiased and both-sided opinion.
Yeah. Also, Ayush, you mentioned social media,
Yeah, I was just
and
about to say, what about the role of Facebook and its affiliates? Because in America, Facebook really is for the older generation. Facebook is big. Same in India.
Twitter.
Instagram is really
Twitter
big
is
among younger
so
people
big.
in India, and WhatsApp is huge
Yeah,
in
yeah,
India, and those are all Facebook
yeah.
affiliates. So, what's the role of social
No,
media?
yeah, so social media is super powerful because based on the accounts you follow and the people you text, like in WhatsApp, for example, they could be sending you a post and that could change your bias. Or if you follow a person on social media, then he says something and then another person would say something, but you only saw his post, so you would think that his opinion is the way the thing went because the media is not always facts. It's also a lot of opinions, and I feel like media should try to post only facts because they have so much power, and they almost have as much power as anything else, and
They
they
arguably
can
have the
change the.
most power because maybe a bit less in America. But I was talking with my dad earlier, and he was talking about probably the biggest news anchor in all of India. His name was Arnab Goswami, and I was asking my
Yeah,
dad,
yeah.
like, how hard would life be for him? You know, every night doing things like that, like showing up on the news, shouting all night and stuff like that. He said, "Yeah, Ayush, it's gonna be tough, but the rewards for him are insane. He could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He could have tremendous power on the government. He could have like politicians just lining up at his door trying to get him to sway the narrative in their side."
Yes, that
The
you can talk.
Yeah, also one thing about you said about WhatsApp and like that, I was my actually my dad also tells me this, but mm, a lot of the times WhatsApp news is always a bit fake because people just constantly forward it without even fact checking
Exactly.
or
Forwarding,
anything. Like
WhatsApp
yeah,
forwarding is terrible.
yeah,
Yeah,
you should never trust. I honestly think you should never trust anything that's been forwarded. Like if it's been proven and you see it in like a official newspaper, in a news channel or something or the other, even if it's a bit biased, at least it's true. Because the worst thing a media or like a news channel wants is to give fake news. So you can there's some kind of trust you can put into them, and there's no trust in these WhatsApp messages whatsoever because
Yeah, you
they
don't
can
know
be
where they
forwarded
came
a
from.
hundred times.
No,
Yeah,
not just you don't know where they
the
came
source is
from.
not reliable. The
There
resource
is
is
no
not
source.
reliable.
You just
Exactly.
get it from anywhere. And
Yeah.
you forward it's like a chain reaction sort of where I forward it to one group, then someone in that group forwards it to another group, and it just spreads randomly,
you
and you
also
never know where it
yeah,
starts.
you also don't know how many people, like how many forwards has happened. Like it doesn't tell you been forwarded
It
80
started
times.
now. Like I think the recent WhatsApp
It does
update shows
one,
how
two,
many
three,
times
and
it's
then
been
many
forwarded.
times.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. That at least it shows it because then you know if it's like how many times it's been
well,
forwarded.
I just saw many times, and I just assumed that there was no,
No, no,
because
no,
on my family
they
group
don't
chat,
track after
it
three times,
was.
I think. But a personal example of this would be one of the first COVID cases in India, at least in North India. It had happened, and we no one really knew what was going to, no one really knew what was happening. And a lot, if you looked at WhatsApp for the news, my mom got two very conflicting stories from on the same group she got the thing from, and she sent it to me just so we like have a laugh at it. Because one was the guy came from China, and the guy like ate at some restaurant and then he went to another city and did all these things. And then another one said he came from Italy and he's been staying at home and people came to his house and he threw a party or something like that. So there's just no way you can tell the difference, and there's no reliability in these things.
Hmm.
Do you this question isn't really related to this, but do you think that some countries like COVID numbers aren't necessarily nice because, for example, in America, like almost all the citizens have been tested, and it's a lot more like testing, whereas in other countries it's not like that.
Of course, testing is one thing, and America, it's again, it's so divided that if you're a Republican or if you're a conservative in a liberal state, you could you could just report your case to to make your state look bad and your leadership look bad, and vice versa. Whereas in a military state, you can just censor everything, and if there are really 1,000 cases, you can just say there are 10.
Yeah, like the downgrading of how many cases you actually have because like there've been so many theories that a lot of countries still do. They if they have like 10,000 cases, they actually say they have like 7,000 rather than 10,000, and they discount that 3,000 just to make themselves look good. But like you also have to also look at it like yeah, Ayush also said that people with opposing views they will do it just to spite the government that they didn't want to come into power. So it's not very trustworthy, you could say, because there will be those people who don't want to do the test because they just don't want to do it, and then there are those people who will do it just to get a positive, just for the government to look bad and the numbers to go up. And it's a very confusing man.
Yeah, in America, I think the main almost the main reason just for having this many cases is the fact that there's two parties, and like both parties despise each other and they're trying to make sure that like whatever the other party's views are, they're gonna do the opposite of that, and it just kind of shows in the number of cases and things like that.
So, what do you guys think about this potential initiative saying if you want the vaccine, I don't know how effective it'll be. That's sort of up to you. That if you want the vaccine, like show up to like a post office or take a picture. Take a picture isn't very reasonable because that can be mimicked, but like maybe show up to a government office, like a police station, show up with a mask, and then like check a box or do something like that that marks your attendance, sort of. And only after like 30 days, 50 days, whatever, of proving that you have worn a mask, done follow all the precautions and everything, only then you get the vaccine.
I don't really think that's that good of an initiative because somebody could just wear a mask once and come and do that,
You
and
have to do that day after day.
oh, for 30, you're saying for 30 days?
Not I don't know the number, but not for one day, like 15, 20, whatever. Just you get the idea.
Um,
I mean, I wish that we can do the same rule that we were discussing earlier, like, that divided and staggered so that that people are following the proper rules. But then it's going to be tougher in countries like India, where like the population of Delhi is like 12 million or something like that, and it's a really, really small place. Like, how many people can come into a police station or a government hospital or something like that
You
and
set up
check
booths
names?
and stuff like that. Just on a random street corner, you just have like you set up a tent and then have that.
That
Um,
that's what
uh,
a lot of I mean, I don't know about you, Ayush, because you don't live in like central Delhi, but like when I would go out in my car, like there, like every 2 3 streets there would always be like a police blockade to make sure that everyone's wearing masks.
Exactly. So
So
just do
it's
something like
somewhat
that. Have
happening.
everyone show up there. Again, it's 24 hours in a day. You don't have to show up all at the same time. And even the peak sessions, like 8 to 8 or something, it's really busy. And thanks for listening to this episode of the Momentum Shift podcast. Catch us in the next episode. Thanks.